some of the flights I've had. I mean, I've had a 600-700 yard slip on a Hungarian partridge, where she took it up into the air, and she must have been about sort of, I don't know, I would say probably about 50-60 foot up in the air when she took it out of the air. And this is after a 600-700 yards, chase, after putting this thing up. I mean, she is awesome, especially on partridge and feather.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Told podcast, brought to you in part by the fine folks at Marshall Radio Telemetry, the makers of the most carefully engineered and reliable tracking systems available. For more information on their awesome products, including their GPS system, head to marshallradio.com. And also by the Falconry Fund, which is a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting and protecting the various arts and practices of falconry and the cultural and environmental assets that make it possible. For more information on the Falconry Fund and what they've got going on, or to donate, head to falconryfund.org. And I'm also happy to announce a new partner in promoting the art of falconry, being Pursuit Falconry and Conservation Magazine. After doing this podcast with Jose, he recommended that I get in touch with the folks at Pursuit Falconry and Conservation Magazine and see if we couldn't collaborate on something, since it seemed like both of our missions were pretty aligned in what we hope to do for each of our respective publications. And so after reaching out to Neil at Pursuit Falconry Magazine and having a conversation with him, we've agreed to work together on some joint ventures and kind of cross-promote each other some in the future. And so here we are. And if you haven't heard anything about the magazine yet or know much about them, I highly recommend you head to pursuitfalconry.co.uk and subscribe. I think you'll find the articles and artwork to be top-notch, and you'll really enjoy it. And this episode features another guest from across the pond. Shortly after I recorded and published the episode with Simon Tyers, Jose hit us up and decided that he would like to try to come on as a guest on the show. And after shooting some emails back and forth and kind of discussing logistics with him, I felt like I could probably make another remote deal happen. So apologies in advance for any choppiness that might have happened. Overall, the recording quality ended up being pretty good, and I think the content is pretty good as well. So any kind of roughness in the recording, I think you'll forgive once you hear the conversation between Jose and I. And I think without any further ado, I will go ahead and turn things over to that conversation. So enjoy. Here we go. All right, good deal. We're rolling. So Jose, nice to meet you. Thank you for giving me this 45 minutes to an hour, however long you have here, to discuss your history a little bit, and to talk a little bit about yourself. And whenever you sent me the information about you, or hit us up via email about doing this, you talked about being a chef and kind of have some other interesting stuff going on with you. Is that correct?
Yeah. I'm chef, falconer. I don't know. Basically game chef is what I am. I specialize in game. But for and foremost, I've been a falconer for many, many years. I mean, I started basically in sort of my early 20s, and have been a falconer ever since. I even married a falconer. So there you go. That's how much falconry is in my blood.
Well, it's you notice that the marriages, the falconry marriages that seem to last the longest are the ones where both of them are falconers.
Yeah.
It's the other ones tend to how do I put this, seem to suffer an undue amount of strain at times.
Yep, we have that here as well. Yep.
Okay, all right. Well, I mean, at least you're honest about it. It's, I mean, my wife's very patient with me and a lot of my endeavors. And I think that if you don't have a very patient and understanding spouse, especially if you get into a sport or a side, kind of lifestyle, I guess you could say, like this, you're going to run into some issues.
Well, I suppose the thing is basically when you're both falconers, especially when you've got the amount of years experience that my wife and I have, We don't so much as have arguments, except that we have sort of intense discussions, about basically what we're doing and what we should do and shouldn't do. And my wife's background is mainly on basically display birds, and she's worked all over the world, basically training and flying display birds, whereas my background has always been on basically hunting and breeding birds. So that we overlap in the middle, if you like.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you guys have a nice counterbalancing relationship in that regard then. Yeah, I mean, it's always nice to be in a relationship where you can do those kind of things together, and I'm sure you guys probably tend to probably squabble a little bit every once in a while over who's going to fly their bird first, which spot, who's going to get the sweet spot today, and all that kind of stuff too. I bet, right?
Yep, that happens. I mean, I'm lucky enough that basically I've got a full-time job, and my wife, she keeps my birds ticking over. Hunting wise, I mean, she doesn't. This year, she's not got a hunting bird out. And other years, if she's got a hunting bird out, she'll have one. Where normally I have two birds on the go, basically to get them out, and so she just keeps them ticking over basically throughout the week while I'm not here.
Okay, so how many? So you have two going right now, you said, or
I have? Yeah, I've got a female goshawk, and she's 3/4 Finnish, 1/4 Butioides. It's a Russian goshawk, and she flies. Obviously, you guys did in pounds and ounces, so she flies at £2.12. And then I have a female peregrine homebred, which I bred here, and she's a female peregrine, and she flies at basically anything from sort of £2.2 to £2.3 ounces.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, there's still lots of guys here that use traditional grams and stuff too, but right. I try, and I know there's a lot of guys like myself that also kind of try to do both, just so we don't have to sit there and look like idiots when we're trying to convert in our head. Like if we know like something's roughly 1,000 grams or whatever, then that's X amount of whatever, and you don't have to sit there and get your phone out each time and Google grams to ounces or whatever. and yeah, so yeah. But yeah, no, that's so what's your wife flying then?
Well, we have my wife has a falconry display team, so basically she does displays, which are very popular here in the UK. She does displays at shows, she does educational talks, she does basically sort of like TV work, a bit of everything. So we've got in excess of about 60 birds here, and there's a whole mixture of everything. I mean, they go anything from our largest bird, which we have here, which we've got an African crowned eagle, through to basically we've also got a Chilean blue, or a buzzard eagle, as I think you guys might call them. We've got everything else from Harris hawks, peregrines, Seika falcons, a whole load of different types of owls, charming goshawk. So we've got a fair mix of birds. We've got some of our breeding stock as well. So we breed brookie-eyed Spanish peregrines, pure peregrines, Harris hawks, and then we also bleed. We've got two pairs of Aplomado falcons, which we bleed as well. The Peruvian ones, not the American ones, obviously.
Wow. How big is your property?
We've got about 2 acres of land. We live out on the fens. Okay. So I know that you did a podcast with Simon Tyers not long ago, right. And Simon lives not too far away from me. It's a little way, but in America, in the scheme of things, right, it's probably sort of like just a quick pop over to Simon's from mine. But I live out in Cambridgeshire, so the Cambridgeshire is very, very flat. It's God took a frying pan to the earth here and basically just flattened it all out for us. And it's mainly large expanses of agricultural land with what we call dikes through it. So by dikes are sort of like streams, if you like, of water that basically go along the edge of the fields, which are used for irrigation. And that's what sort of crisscrosses the land here. So we don't have any fences. We don't have any barbed wire or anything like that. It's just basically the dikes. And sometimes you've got to walk all the way up the dike to get across to get back into the field that basically you're looking at your bird, but you've got all the way up and around to go and get to it. That's if you don't go to get wet going across the dike. But yeah, I mean, it's ground that holds partridges, pheasant, duck. We have quite a lot of ducks that go onto the dikes as well. Also some snipe on the open ground as well. And there's a mixture of other birds as well. Sometimes we have things like golden plovers that basically go on here as well, which are on our quarry list, so we can take those.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like your scenario is a lot like when we try and like ditch hawk, ducks and stuff around here. And yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just annoyingly enough, just wide enough where you can't jump across safely. So yeah, then next thing you know, you got to have somebody go around and just kind of hang out on the other side so they can hurry up and get to the bird for you. So you can take your leisurely 20-minute walk around to the other side, and while you're coming back over, and it's just the other guy's kind of babysitting for you. And
yeah. And if you want to go across the street here, if you want to go across the dikes normally have about basically 3 or 4 foot of sludge at the bottom of them. Which basically you sink into very, very quickly and then can't get out the other side.
Yeah, next thing you know, you got to get somebody to tow you out and winch you out. Yeah. It's happened here a few times too. But well, so it sounds like you guys have a pretty good variety of game there then. I mean, like when I was talking to Simon and when I've talked to some other people that are familiar with kind of the landscape over that way, the biggest hurdle I keep hearing over and over again is everything's private and owned, and you have to, have permission or pay fees or whatever the case is. I mean, what's your setup over there then? Do you know people that you're able to fly regularly on their land?
Yeah, so basically, in all of my life, of my hawking life, that I used to live in Hertfordshire, which is not far from London, and on the outskirts of Hertfordshire. And now, see, the way it works here in the UK is that the ground, that basically you own the ground. So if you're a farmer and you own 1,000 acres, then you own 1,000 acres, and you own everything on that 1,000 acres, unless you've come to an agreement with somebody and you've paid, they've paid you for the hunting rights to that ground. Or the shooting rights to that ground. If they paid you for the shooting rights, then you can still allow people to basically fly birds on there because they've only got the shooting rights. But obviously, at other times of the year or days when they're not shooting, if you've got the hunting rights, then you've got it completely, and that's what you do with it. But most of the farmers where I go are small farms where there's wild birds on the actual farms, and the farmers basically like the idea of falconry. They like the idea of the birds. I think in all the years that I've been doing falconry, I've never ever been turned away from a farm where I've gone to actively look to see if I can fly my bird. There is quite a lot of wild game where we are. It's very skittish. The actual when you're flying, there's not loads and loads of wild raptors here like they are in America. We have sort of common buzzards every now and again. We have red kites every now and again. We do have a pair of resident peregrines that basically live in a little bit further away in Peterborough from where I am. It's about sort of 25, 30 miles away. And every now and again, they will come in and mess up a flight. But normally, where we are, there's the actual birds are living on very open ground. So there's very little cover for them. So they fly like rockets. I put down every year where I am here. Since I started living here, I love grey partridges. I think you call them Huns. Hungarian partridges, and it's the typical basically partridge of our countryside. We basically the partridge that should be here as opposed to the red-legged partridge which was introduced. And I love them. So I have a pen in the back of my paddock, and my paddock sits in the middle of the field. So basically, I've got a very large paddock on the back, and one corner of the paddock there is a pen there. And what I do is I put down anything but 100, 150 every year. Which I get them as basically 7 to 8 week old birds, and they go into the pen, and I feed them and everything in the pen. And after they've been in there about 3 or 4 weeks, we open the pens and we let them out. And I've got feeders basically set out, and they go out and they're wild, they're running around. And what happens when we bring the youngsters in, they start to call, and all the wild ones come in as well, and they tend to sort of group up with them. And so after about sort of 3 or 4 weeks of them being open and going in and out, they tend to come back in for food. I then close the door and leave some of the partridges in and leave some out. And then what happens is that you end up with basically the wild ones sort of sticking around, in the area. And then basically, again, normally after Christmas, I'll open the door again and I'll allow them in and out again. And then basically once we get into sort of after Christmas, I'll close the door and I'll leave some in. So I'll leave about sort of 20 or 30 birds or sometimes even more in. And then what I do with those birds is I overwinter them. So basically I feed them and look after them all throughout the winter. And then at the end of the winter, when we come into the spring season and the partridges are starting to pair up, I then open them and just let them all out. And that increases the stock that I have here. The birds will naturally breed in the area. So basically I've got partridges around me. I've got permission from all of the farmers around me that I can fly my birds. And if anything, basically the farmers are quite happy because we act as a sort of pest control, if you like, for the birds that are there. So I can fly pretty much anything that's on these fields. I can shoot these fields if I want to as well, because the farmers own the ground. It's no syndicate on here. There's no one putting birds down apart from me, and they're quite happy for that. I mean, this year, one of the good seasons that we've had this year's been a good year for wildfowl. There's a lot of wildfowl about, sort of ducks and that, and there is also a lot of hares this year. We have a heck of a lot of brown hares this year. We've got pretty much every time I go out for a walk, I'll put up 3 or 4 of them. I've got great flights at them. Wildfowl is great, except for we've just been hit with bird flu again. So we've had the first sort of noggins of it. There's been 2 reported cases so far, and we're all sort of on tenterhooks watching it. I don't think there's any falconers actively chasing wildfowl at the moment, or chasing basically any of the duck species. Just in case basically we have any problems with it. We've had quite a few guys last year that had some problems with it, where they not so much that they were out chasing ducks, but what they did is they basically were out in areas where basically there were ducks, and what happened is that I think they were either the guys that, because we have guys that basically shoot pigeons here. So we have wood pigeons. Now, a few of you guys from basically America have been over here. I've got a friend of mine, Brad Mitchell, who basically used to fly out there in America, and I've been over to his place. And when he came over, he was amazed by our wood pigeons, which are stocky, big pigeons. I mean, your doves that you have out there, or imagine something that's basically sort of 3 times the size of those. I mean, they're quite big. And we have a lot of pigeons, and we're allowed to shoot pigeons all year round. That's not something that we actively hawk. We tend to call it check. Because when we're trying to fly in a game hawk, if you've got one of these things that flies underneath it, it takes the bird off, and it will take it for miles. So we try to sort of keep them off of that. Now, those wood pigeons, some of the guys here, what they'll do is they'll use steel shot, and they'll shoot them, and then they sell them to falconers, and falconers are using them as food. And what happened is a few of the guys, basically, where the guys have been out shooting, they shot a couple of ducks and mixed the ducks in with the pigeons, fed the pigeons, and the ducks carried the virus. And then that spread it onto the pigeons, and then the actual falcons that were in the pens, when they were feeding them, then basically got bird flu. And those guys, because they actively fed that product to the birds, they had their whole sort of like their whole projects killed. They had to come in. DEFRA came in and basically said, that's it, they've all got to go. And because they had done it themselves, there was no compensation to them. If it was a case that the birds had not been fed that, and there was bird flu had come in from something flying over the top, or a duck landing on dead on top of the aviary, and they got bird flu, then they're liable for compensation from the government. But because they've not that, and these have been guys that have had pairs of geofalcons and peregrines and all that sort of stuff that have had them lost. Here at home, obviously, with the amount of birds that we've got in my wife's business, as soon as we start hearing things about bird flu around here, that's it. I'm not allowed to fly anymore. And last year, my goshawk had sort of like probably about 3 months out flying, and that was it. Then I had to stop just because of the risk. They can't take the risk here with the amount of birds that we have.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, that would be devastating if you guys lost, 60 birds to a virus. I mean, yeah, I understand. I mean, you can't, if it's part of your livelihood, especially, I can totally understand being erring on the side of caution with that. And man, I mean, I hate I hate hearing stories like that. It just wrenches my gut. I mean, I've and ducks also, I mean, for as many people that actively hunt ducks and then feed, the duck to their bird afterward, and so it makes me, I wonder why there's not more instances of this sometimes. I think it's fortunate that there's not more, because it's not just viruses that ducks especially can carry, but, they also harbor specific strains of bacteria that can also be very fatal to birds and stuff as well. I mean, I actually lost a prairie falcon a couple years ago to that.
Really?
Yeah. I fed her some duck, and it was ended up having, I forgot what the actual strain was, but within, I think it was 5 days or so afterwards, which was kind of weird in and of itself, because normally, whenever they get that particular strain, it usually can kill them within a day or so, that fast sometimes if it's not caught. But my falcon was completely asymptomatic. I mean, wasn't acting sick or anything. I actually droned him about 800 feet the day before, and he was just sitting hooded and sleeping just fine the night before. Woke up the next morning, he was laying there dead. And I sent him for the necropsy, and that's what they found. And I wasn't aware of that before. So I mean, it's as much as it sucks to have those things as learning experiences, it's also fortunate way, so you can kind of try and be looking out for stuff like that in the future as well. But no,
the thing about I mean, I've never heard of anything like that here. I mean, maybe it's something that's endemic to parts of North America, but I mean here the main thing that basically carries on from bird to bird is the France that we get on basically in pigeons. But I mean, obviously, when you take pigeons and you freeze them, that kills the bacteria, and then basically that's not a problem. You can feed them. The thing about the bird flu is that the bird flu basically, even if you freeze them, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it sort of just lies dormant, and when you feed it to the birds, they get it. And the last biggest thing that basically sort of killed lots of people's birds here was basically what they call peregrine virus. And peregrine virus basically killed 3 of my peregrines. I had 2 Brookii females, which I was flying, and I had a twice interviewed female, which basically she was up flying, great, doing phenomenally well. Took her up to Scotland, flying her in Scotland. And the first day she knocked down a grouse into basically cover. It's the first time I'd ever flown a grouse. And on the lowlands down here, she was basically bouncing things off the ground. So she tried to do exactly the same thing in Scotland. And of course, first grouse, she bounced straight into the heather. And so I was thinking, well, I'm up here for a week. She'll learn, And the second day when we took her out, she just wasn't flying as well. So that night when I was feeding her, she threw up all her food. And then after that was it. She started to go downhill. We came back down to England from Scotland, and basically took her straight to the vets. And basically the vets checked her out. They had her on drips, had her on everything. But all she did, she basically just lost weight continuously, lost weight, and throwing up food. And there's nothing we could have done to save her. And then pretty much a week after she started with all the symptoms, her sister started with all the symptoms. And her sister was a brown bird still, and then lost both of them. Which was a massive blow, because obviously you've been training birds for that long and flying them. These were 2 great falcons, and that was it. And then I didn't hear anything about peregrine virus then for another couple of years. And then I had a little tearsall brookie again. He was basically into his first molt, blue feathers, took him out. Brookies here basically they molt very quickly, so the brookies are normally molted by sort of here by the end of July, beginning of August. They're done, And this bird had come out sort of towards the end of August. And again, it started to show symptoms, and again, rushed it to the vet, and dead. There's nothing you can do about it, dead. That's the last time we had something that was that sort of fatal, if you like, or that I've experienced it anyway down here. And I lost 3 very, very good falcons to it. Yeah,
that sucks. Well, and the other frustrating part too is with some of these bacterial strains and viruses, your bird doesn't even have to eat the prey item or anything. They can just come in contact with it, touch it, and can still get really sick and die from it. And it just makes it that much more frustrating, especially whenever they're asymptomatic and aren't showing any signs of, any major signs of, being sick or anything that you can't even do anything about it. They're just dead the next morning.
That's what I mean. What you're describing there with your falcon is pretty much what happened with peregrine virus. I mean, within a few days, the only reason my first female falcon lasted so long was because she was as fit as a fiddle, and she was like strong, big, strong, muscular bird flying at a good heavy weight. And that's why she lasted basically sort of about 5 days before she died. But I mean, her sister died within 2 days. And the little tearsall, again, that 2 days, boom, dead. Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess, now that we've spent, probably about 15 minutes talking about different ways our birds can die. I guess, I guess this will be a good time to transition to, just talk a little bit more about what got you into all this. What everybody's got a story. Everybody's got a particular thing that sparked their interest in falconry. So, talk about that.
I've always been, my parentage is basically both Spanish. Both my parents are Spanish. And from the age of basically 11, up until I was put sort of about, I don't know, 17, 18, my mother decided that, you know, I should go to Spain and spend some time. Well, sorry, my father decided I should spend some time with his part of the family. His part of the family come from northern Spain, Galicia, which is basically above Portugal. And I sort of was sent off with my brother to go and spend the summer out there. And that place there was up in the middle of the mountains. I mean, it's a beautiful place. Right up in the mountains, loads of woodlands, loads of deciduous and coniferous basically trees. So basically you've got, you know, alpines, and then you've got real thick old oak trees, you know, in these forests. And it's one of the only places in Spain that they still have basically bears and wolves. And I used to spend all of my summers up there, out in the woodland. My uncles and my cousins are up there had a great sort of knowledge about the countryside, so I gained a great knowledge about the countryside. And although they didn't shoot or hunt or anything like that, I just grew a real sort of appeal for the outdoors. At that time, I started at Chef's College here in the UK, and I did 2 years at college, and I had a fascination for wild food. And so every time that basically I picked up a book, I was looking at basically where different stuff comes from. I looked what people in different countries ate that was wild food and how they used it. You know, as far as I could, you know, when you look at all the mainstream meats that we have, you know, a piece of beef is a piece of beef is a piece of beef. Okay, it might come from different breeds and it might have a slightly different feed, but it's different. You know, it's pretty much the same. Whereas basically, if you look at something like a partridge or a pheasant or a Hungarian partridge, you know, as you guys call them, or a grouse, you know, they're all different. They all eat different stuff. There are different ways in which basically those animals need to be looked at. And it's very challenging for a chef to cook them. So I grew an appreciation there. And then from the age of about 17, 18 till I was about 21, 22, my mother decided that I should go to her part of the family. Her part of the family was down in the south of Spain, and that's in Andalusia. And my uncles there, completely different kettle of fish. They fished and they shot. And so I went out with them a lot. And again, I gained an appreciation of basically harvesting products basically to the table. Roll on, going to college. And when I went to college, I basically did my 2 years at college and loved it and came out of it, did phenomenally well. Then went on to work in Spain for a little while. And I worked out there for about 5 or 6 months, basically working as a chef in the Costa del Sol, basically Andalusia. And then when I came back to the UK, I went to go and work at the House of Commons. I was a chef at the House of Commons. And one of the first guys that I worked with at the House of Commons was a falconer, and a guy called Steve Farrar. And Steve basically flew Goshawks, mainly Goshawks. That's what he had. He had a pair of Souto Falcons, which he'd bred. And falconry was sort of something that I'd heard about, and I love birds of prey. But I thought it was an ancient art that nobody did anymore. You know, when I tried to find books in the library to do something to it, because obviously back in those days we didn't have Google. So if there's something new that you found out about, you went to the library and tried to find out as much as you could about it. And all the books were old books, you know. So I didn't think anybody did it anymore. I thought it was, this guy was a bit eccentric. Anyway, cut long story short, he asked me if I wanted to go out one day with him. So, jumped in the car, went over to his place, and out we went with a female goshawk, and I was hooked. You know, it was just incredible. I had never seen anything like it. I was just completely in awe of this bird. You know, this thing of perfection sitting on his fist. And I fell in love with it. And so pretty much every weekend that I could get out of work and go up to his place, I would do that. This guy at the time, he had a female goshawk, a Czechoslovakian female goshawk, a very small one, which flew about £1.15 that he had out on loan. And the guy who had it out on loan to had given him a male redtail. He wasn't particularly enamored with this male redtail because, he was a complete goshawk man. And so he said to me, look, when you come out with me, if you want, you can fly this redtail. I'll show you the weight control and everything. He started to teach me a little bit about it. Got this redtail. Now, the only problem was with this redtail, it was an imprint. And you can see where this is going. Yeah. So it was the most cantankerous, nasty, horrible redtail, that you'd ever seen in your life. Yeah. And this was a male, not a female. Since then, I've had a lot of experience with red tails with friends and ones that I've flown myself, and I've come to understand the psyche of a red tail, or the psychotic of a red tail, especially an imprint one. And this thing taught me a few things. Yeah, where to and not to put my hands was one main thing, and it nailed me a few times. But I loved it. I absolutely loved this bird, and I was even though it was cantankerous and it didn't particularly want to do what I wanted it to do. When it did fly well, it flew phenomenally well, and it was stunning to look at because this was an adult bird. It was absolutely stunning. Even next to the goshawk, it was stunning. Anyway, I flew with him for about 2 years, and got a girlfriend. Basically sort of started sort of look seriously at things, and then I broke up with my girlfriend, and I sort of went through a hard time after I broke up with my girlfriend. And this friend of mine, Steve, basically by then he was a very good friend. I remember one day, not long after basically the breakup, I was round at his place and we were having a cup of tea, and it was basically out in the summer. We were sitting in his garden, and this Czechoslovakian female goshawk that he'd given to somebody else had come back to him, and the red tail had gone. And so this bird, I'd seen it a few times there, and he said, "Oh, pick it up and see how you get on with it." So I picked it up, and it sat on the fist, and it was like towards the end of the summer, and this thing was lovely. It was fully molted, really, really nice bird. And we were sitting there having a drink, and while we were sitting there having a drink, he put the Poe perch away, and he put everything away. And we sat there for about an hour or two, and then he said to me, I said, "Oh right," I said, "I've got to go." And my parents had gone away on holiday. I was still living at home then. And I said to him, I said, "Where do you want me to put the goss?" And he said, "I don't want you to put it anywhere." I said, "I want you to take it home." And I looked at him and sort of said to him, "What do you mean you want me to take it home?" He said, "Well," he said, "you've had a few issues." He said, "and you need something to get you out of that hole you're in." He said, "So take that bird home," he said, "and fly it." He said, "and that will help you." And I thought about it. I thought, well, my parents are away for 2 weeks, so I might as well take this thing at home. So I took it home. I didn't have the Muse at home at the time. But my dad's car was in the garage. So basically that got chucked out onto the road, and basically I put the bird in the garage. And so for 2 weeks, my dad's pride and joy spent 2 weeks sitting out on the road while where we lived. And I had this bird in the garage, and I trained. I started doing all the training process. Obviously, this bird had been flown before, but through Steve's tuition, I started doing some bits and pieces with it and training and that sort of stuff. And I got it going. It was a great little bird. It was really good. I mean, it's a parent reared goshawk. European goshawks, as you guys all know, out of America now, you've all had a lot of time with them. And back when I went to America, there's very few European goshawks were in America, and I think that there was we could never understand how you guys couldn't fly parent reared goshawks out in America. Your native goshawks. Whereas we fly parent-reared birds here. We could think it can't be that difficult. And we'd go out to America, and the guys would go, no, it's impossible. You can't do it. You have to imprint them, because otherwise, basically, they're just impossible to fly. And this thing was a parent-reared bird, and it was well manned. A lot of time had been spent on it. So I took it back to my friend's house, and I said, look, we're going away for like about 4 or 5 days. In a week's time, I'll have it back then. So he said, okay. So I took it back to him. My parents went away for 4 days, and by the time they came back, I built a Muse in the garden. So when they got back, the bird was already in the Muse, sitting there, happy as Larry. And my mother, I remember my mother turning around to my father and sort of saying, listen, he needs it, leave him. Yeah, he'd leave him with it. So, I had this goshawk, started flying this goshawk and taking it out, and I flew it for about 2 years. Loved it. It was a great bird. Here in the UK, I started completely the wrong way. I shouldn't have got a goshawk, right? And I don't condone anybody getting a goshawk as one of your first birds. I mean, okay, I had the experiences with the red tail, and I sort of messed about a little bit with the kestrel, but do not get a goshawk as a first bird unless you have somebody that's with you that can teach you a few things about goshawks. Because I mean, like they're a bit of a nightmare. But I learned how to climb trees really well. I learned how to use telemetry really well. And this thing was great. It was really good. It wasn't a particularly big bird, 1 pound, 15 ounces. It was, weren't big at all, but it caught a good head of quarry. And then I was going to buy this bird off of Steve. He had a guy who wanted it for a breeding project, and I was going to sort of buy it off of him. He hadn't made his mind up what he was going to do. And then towards the middle of one of the seasons, this goss chased a rabbit across an open field, and it crashed into a hawthorn bush. Now, hawthorns have got very, very long spines, yeah. And what it done, I didn't know then, but the spine had gone into the bird's foot and come out, but the tip of the spine had broken into its foot. So it ended up with secondary bumblefoot. Its foot, just the next day, its foot blew up like a balloon, and I didn't know what had happened to it, and I couldn't find any holes, anything. They took it to the vet, and by that time it got heat the neck, because obviously it was a Sunday, couldn't take it to the vet on a Sunday, so there was heat in the foot. They started it on a course of antibiotics. Back then, the antibiotics that we had took a long time to basically get the bird through the bird's system to be able to basically get, especially into the feet that has very poor circulation. So we they said they would have to operate on it to take the where the spine was, and they did an operation. They did quite a few operations. They did 2 operations on the bird, and every time a bird went under anaesthetic back then, I mean, we're talking sort of 25 years ago, you held your breath, because there was a good chance that the bird wouldn't come out of anaesthetic. And so it went twice under, and twice it came out, and it was great. And by the time they basically finished with the foot and everything, bandaged it all up, the bird basically healed up really well. But the vet said to me, look, you don't want to be flying this bird at game anymore. This bird wants to be retired to an aviary. If there's a chance there could be something in the foot, if it has a knock, there's a chance it could flare up. He said, you really want to give this bird some time. And it was in the base of the foot. So Steve decided to basically get it off basically for breeding, to the guy that wanted it for breeding. So he gave it to the guy. He had it for breeding, and she bred the following year. But that left me without hawk for the following season. And by that time, I was so hooked that I couldn't wait another year for this bird to breed. So I then started looking at basically, well, okay, what can I get? And at that time, I just bought my first flat in London. And I was thinking to myself, I can't afford a goshawk, because goshawks back then were sort of like about £2,500 a goshawk. So I went for the next best thing, which had started to come down here in price, which were very, very expensive, but they started to come down, and that was a Harrishawk. So I had a friend of mine who bred Harrishawks, and went to him and looked at some Harrishawks that he had. I didn't have a lot of experience with Harrishawks, and at that time, there were a lot of conflicting arguments as to basically how to fly Harrishawks here in the UK. A lot of people basically wanted to treat them exactly the same as goshawks. And basically take them, cut them down, fly them. That was it. That was the thing. Get them at sort of 11, 12 weeks. Yeah, well, now we know you don't do that with the Harrishawk. Harrishawks, you hear now, the ones that I breed and sell, I mean, I won't let anybody have, I'll let experienced falconers can have them at 14 to 15 weeks, but anybody else has them at 16 weeks. And so we learned this over the years with them. So I had this bird at basically 15 weeks, went and bought it. I think I paid £900 for it at the time. Harrishawks now are about £350. So that's just how much basically Harrishawks have come down. And I got Ellie. Ellie was basically, she was, I would say, my first proper self-owned hunting bird that I properly owned. And I flew that bird for near on 12 years. She was awesome. In the 12 years that I had her, she took over 750 head of game. She took everything from, she was a 2-pound bird. She took everything from, the largest hare she caught was 8.5 pounds. And she caught a grey lag goose that weighed 10.5 pounds. She caught rabbits. She caught partridges off a stoop, basically waiting on above you and then stooping down as the partridge is lifting, taking them. She caught seagulls. She got, incredible bird. And I learned a lot about flying Harrishawks from her. I learned a lot over the coming years of basically flying Harrishawks. At that time, there was a big divide between goshawk flyers and Harrishawk flyers. Well, I was in the position where I'd already flown goshawks, and I put a lot of the knowledge of flying a goshawk into flying a Harrishawk without the cutting him to the bone sort of syndrome, understanding about the bird and trying to think a little bit more about the bird in the wild and what it would do in the wild, how it hunted, right down to the points of basically when a bird should be picked up and why you pick it up at that age. The bird needs to gain its own independence away from the family. And then it also needs to understand that basically you're not a food provider the same as the parent, that you're basically a partner in its hunting. So over those years, I learned a lot about flying Harrishawks. I joined a club called the British Falcon Association, and the British Falcon Association was basically back then the third largest club in the UK. And the BHA, we had a region in Hertfordshire. I became the regional officer in Hertfordshire with a friend of mine, a guy called Paul Harris. We ran it together. We had about 85 members in our region in Hertfordshire, and the other regions was dotted around the UK. And we had affiliated clubs in other countries like Spain. And then we, from that, not long afterwards, I became a chairman of the BHA. I was chairman for 5 years. The BHA basically still while flying LE and at the same time, I also went out to Spain and I met one of your fellow countrymen, Tom Cade. I was out there in Spain when Tom Cade was receiving a prize from the Spanish Falconry Association, for his work to falconry. And Tom had gone out there to do a talk on geofalcons and the Peregrine Fund. And I met him and his wife. I went out there with another sort of well-known breeder here in the UK, a guy called Derek Stoughton. And Derek was out there to basically do a talk on breeding Goshawks in captivity. And I went out there because the guys in Spain, I speak Spanish, I'm fluent in Spanish. And by that time, I had a lot of contact with Spanish falconers. And the guys up there came over to the UK, saw me fly my Harrishawk, and Harrishawks was a new thing to Spain. And they were making all the mistakes that we'd made, and cutting them to the bone. And he had these screaming imprint things that basically were thinking, oh my God. And the guy sort of said to me, will you come over and do a talk on flying and hunting Harrishawks, what you've done with them? So I went out there, and much to my embarrassment, when I met Tom Cade, and Tom, I was in awe of this guy. I'd heard a lot about him, about the Peregrine Fund. I was a member of NAFA for many, many years, and I'd read about him. And I was absolutely in awe of meeting this guy. Such a lovely gentleman, him and his wife. And I remember the first night sitting there where we were at dinner, and I said, and the next night was my talk. And I said to Tom, I said, I'm really embarrassed. I said, to be basically doing a talk on Harrishawks with you there. I said, like, talk about teaching somebody to suck eggs. It's like, it's I really, and he said, and he's turned around, he said to me, Jose, he said, I know nothing about Harrishawks. He said, I've spent my life with Falcons. I know absolutely nothing about Harrishawks. And so the next day we went to this talk, and there was a massive auditorium of people, and a lot of people had come to listen because there were very, very few people flying Harrishawks and lots of people flying Goshawks. And all the Goshawk guys were sitting at the back, sort of whispering to each other, saying, hey, laughing at these crows that everybody was flying, right? They weren't any good. And so then I started, back then they have obviously the slideshow, and there was slides, they were showing slides, and I had pictures of this bird, miraculous bird that I had, and other birds that I had in my club, taking a whole myriad of different types of game, explaining to them about at what age they should take them, about training techniques, about how they should basically bring their birds on, about using make hawks, what we call a make hawk. I don't know if you have that. Do you have that in America?
So you talk about an established bird?
Yeah. So when you have an adult female flying with young males and females, they teach each other to hunt, and basically obviously the adult female will tend to basically respect the younger birds coming on her kills without fighting, or arguing together. Also about socializing birds, socialize. I mean, we have a thing here when we breed our Harrishawks, and we have an aviary which is separate, a large aviary. And Charlotte, my wife, her display birds that she flies, she has a team of I think it's five or six, I think now, and she'll have like 2 or 3 of them in the aviary, letting them molt, giving them some time off while the others are working, and she'll swap them over at different times of the year. So there's always 2 or 3 birds in the aviary. And then what we've done over the years is when we breed our Harrishawks, they're in seclusion aviaries, and then once they're around about sort of 12 to 13 weeks old, we take them from the seclusion aviary and we put them into the other seclusion aviary with the adult birds that they don't know. So what happens is they become socialized, and also they become independent because those adult birds aren't going to feed them. They've got to go and get their own food. And we find that it makes for really great, well socialized birds that accept other birds, and that sort of stuff. So, all this sort of stuff I was explaining, and after the, all the Goshawk guys are basically whispering to each other when they're seeing the pictures, these great big hares that they're catching, and the other birds that all these are catching, and sort of like, And at the end of it, Tom came over to me, and he was very generous with the fact that basically saying that he'd learned a lot that night about Harris Hawks, things that he didn't know. How much of that was tongue in cheek, and that I will never know. But such a lovely, lovely, lovely man, you know, while I spent her time out there. So yeah, and then when I came back, I spent quite a few years up in Scotland with Ellie, flying rabbits. And in Scotland, it was incredible because there was a lot of rabbits in Scotland in the area where we used to go to. And there was two of us used to go out there, and I was so mad at that time and young and unattached that I would do something like, you know, on Friday afternoon, I finished work, we'd jump in the car, drive overnight straight up to Scotland, which is probably about 11 and a half hours from here, and then get to Scotland, fly all day Saturday night, we'd probably go out shooting, and we'd basically go have something to eat all day Sunday, and then drive all the way back to London, ready for work on Monday morning. We do mad things like that. And up in Scotland, it was incredible the amount of flights that we have. I mean, I think I in one day I took 11 rabbits. I think one day with Ellie. She was just an awesome bird. And then one day up in Scotland, we were up the side of a hill, and she came off my fist chasing a rabbit down the hill, and she hit the rabbit and rolled over about 4 or 5 times. When I got to her, she was a bit puffed. The rabbit was dead, but she was a bit puffed. And as she got up, she was a bit sort of woozy. So I picked her up and I sort of gave her a little bit of time off. And I said to the guys, I'm going to leave her for a while in the car. And I said, we'll come back to her and basically make sure she's all right. Anyway, went back to the car. She was fine, got her out, gave her a couple of flights. And she seemed to be okay. So we went out and she carried on. She just basically seemed to be fine. Anyway, the next following day, it rained for the next full day. So we didn't get to fly at all. And she sort of sat there and she was with the other hawks. Harris hawks, when they sit there and it's cold weather, they sort of sit, they look ill, they put that head down. And so I didn't think too much of it. Anyway, we came all the way back to the UK, to England. And she was in the back of the car, and we came back on a Saturday night. And when I reached my friend's house, I was going to stay at his house. We both decided we have a double box in the back of my car. So we opened the boxes, and both birds were sitting there 1 foot up. And we said, we'll leave them in there for tonight. And tomorrow we were going to go hawking. So we were all ready to go hawking. So we just leave them in the car. The next morning, got up, went down, had breakfast, went in the car to basically go hawking, opened the boxes, and she was dead on the floor. And she'd ruptured one of her air sacs, and she had an internal bleed. And because she sat there for 2 days, we didn't see any signs of anything, because she just sat there. If we'd flown her, we would have seen there was something wrong. But we didn't. She ate well. She's nothing wrong with her. So Ellie died, and then I got I didn't really want to fly anything else. I was really heartbroken that this bird had died. And in the years sort of mean that I had flown other birds. I mean, I flew a couple of the European kestrels, and I actually taught 2 of them to hunt really well. To the point where one of them took a moorhen, which is basically sort of like about 3 times its size, and another one that caught a partridge. But this bird was sort of a bit special, and in the years, I remember every year sort of going, taking her out the molt and thinking to her, am I going to fly you again? Is it going to be as exciting? But this bird, Harris hawks, as they get older, they just get craftier and cleverer, and they're great. And I probably would have carried on flying her for many, many years to come. But that season, I had a friend of mine who had a male Harris hawk, which he'd bred, and he had very big Harris hawks. He had the larger Harris hawks that you find right out in the deserts out in Arizona. So this was a big thing. I mean, a male Harris hawk flew at £1.10. And so he said to me, I'm going away for about a week or 2. He said, will you carry on this bird's training? And gave it to me. And a couple of weeks went past. I trained this bird. I flew it. I was flying it. And he didn't ring me. So I kept trying to ring him, and he wouldn't answer the phone. And, and it was so about 3-4 weeks went past. And then finally I got hold of him. And he'd gone away for 2 weeks, come back, but wouldn't answer the phone because he wanted me to fly the Harris hawk. So basically he said to me, well, you've got it now. You've got it fine. You carry on flying it. And by that time, obviously, I got made with the bird, so I carried on flying it. And that was Mac. And I flew Mac probably for about 5 years before he went into a breeding project. And then after that, when I got another female Harris hawk, by that time I was married. So then basically had commitment, a new house, basically moved. And then decided, basically Goshawk is hard work. This is easy to fly these. And I had also the countryside to fly it. And I got Kaylee, a female Harris hawk, which I flew. And again, she wasn't particularly that big. Yeah, great bird. Not as, you always measure it by the really great ones that you have. And this bird, although she was good and a great bird, manning wise and everything was great, she just wasn't the same as the first couple of birds that I'd had. The first two good hunting birds I'd had. And then she had a stroke. So she ended up with 1 foot, not being able to use one leg properly, and she used to just lean on one leg. In the end, she got a callus on the leg, so we had to have her put down because she got a callus on the leg, and it was going to turn into bumblefoot on the leg. There's nothing to do about it. And then, so at that time, a friend of ours, basically, who we have, who used to buy food off of us a lot, because we sell hawk food. He came over one day and he said to my wife Charlotte, he said, I've got a male goshawk which I've been flying for years, and I've got another friend of mine who had a male goshawk. They're brothers, and this male goshawk that he had, he said my friend became very ill. He said while I've been away, because he'd been away in Ireland working, he took the goshawk with him. And he said my friend's become very ill. He said, and this bird has pretty much sat there and done nothing. He said his wife has just thrown food at it. He said, and I went to see it the other day, and it is in a terrible state. All its tail feathers are broken. It's been kept on gravel. He said its feet basically have got some blisters on its feet. It's not a particularly good condition. I want to get it away from, he said, because they're just looking for someone to take it, because my friend's never going to fly a bird again. So Charlotte said, okay, well, we'll have a look at it. He said, well, I know your husband's flown goshawks before. He said, so basically it'd be great for him. Sorry. So he brought this bird over. And the problem is when you've got lots of birds here, in the UK, we're quite scrutinised by the authorities. So basically, when you've got lots of birds, and if you bring a bird in that's not in particularly great condition, it's a great thing for people to point the finger at you to say that you did it. So he brought this bird over, and I kid you not, this bird didn't have a tail. Its tail was smashed to pieces. Its feet, it had calluses in its feet where it had basically been baiting on the gravel. Its talons were rounded, and it was in a real sorry state. But I felt really sorry for it. It wasn't a particularly big male goshawk, I should say. Flew at about sort of £1.7, £1.8, and but there was something about it I liked. It had one white feather on its side of its wing. We called it Flash because it had this one white feather, and it took a good year for this bird to basically feed up and nurse it back to what it was. And I'll tell you what, took it out and it became a really great partridge hawk. Flew brilliantly, absolutely brilliant. But by that time, this bird was about sort of 6 or 7 years old. I mean, it had the bright orange eyes. They're really, as they get older, they're really orange. And I flew that for probably about another 7 or 8 years. I mean, it was a stonking little bird until it just lost the ability or didn't want to fly anymore as it got older, and it just then died. It was just natural causes. It just died. And it unfortunately, it died just before I was about to. There's a book I was writing a book called Feathers, which you've seen. I mean, and in Feathers, basically, there was it's not a cookery book. It's a book about game, about the history and background and all of the information about game. But it's also about how to prepare it, its history, and also basically recipes. That you can go in. And I was writing this book, and I had this idea of putting a section in the book about falconry. Because what I wanted to do was show the old ways in which game was harvested for the table and using an old method of cookery, which is fire, barbecues, something like that. So I wanted an adult goshawk for this book. And so when this bird died, when Flash died, it left me in a bit of a quandary, really, because I didn't have an adult goshawk. And I thought, well, if I take a young bird now, I've got a full year of flying it. I've got all of the nightmare of basically flying an IS, whereas what I need is an adult bird. So put a thing out on the grapevine, and a good goshawk breeder, a guy called Glyn Thompson, he had a friend who had a female goshawk that had just basically gone into its adult plumage. And this bird, this guy got divorced, and he'd moved to his new girlfriend's house. And this bird was basically, he said the girlfriend had terriers. He said it's an accident waiting to happen. He said, like, this bird's basically not in the area where it should be. It's not in a mews. There's nothing. So he said to me, this guy would be looking to basically sell the bird. And for me, as long as I'm not one for picking up secondhand birds. I've had these two goshawks, which I've been really lucky with. The first one, the Czechoslovakian one, and then Flash. But I'm not really one for secondhand. I've always trained my own birds from scratch. So I went to have a look at this bird, and she was a sweetheart. I fell in love with it straight away. Great looking bird, big, powerful, strong goshawk, but absolutely laid back as anything, which is unusual for a parent reared goshawk. I don't like imprint goshawk, so this was a parent reared bird. So I went and got her, and I bought her, and she appears in the book. She's in quite a few of the pictures of the book, and her name's Sophia, and Sophia is awesome. I mean, she is like, I mean, some of the flights I've had. I mean, I've had a 600-700 yard slip on a Hungarian partridge, where she took it up into the air, and she must have been about sort of, I don't know, I would say probably about 50-60 foot up in the air when she took it out of the air. And this is after a 600-700 yards, chase, after putting this thing up. I mean, she is awesome, especially on partridge and feather. She was flown quite a bit on hare in her first year, but she tends to turn up her nose on hares now. She much prefers basically feathered game. I mean, I had the early part of the season here. We before the bird food came in, I had a fantastic duck flight with her. As a duck came off a pond where she went up and pushed it up into the air and went underneath it and inverted upside down and took it out of the air. I mean, she's awesome for that sort of thing, and she's great, and she flies well in real open countryside, which is unusual for a goshawk. Goshawks fly better in woodland. They're more adapted in woodland, but she's good as gold now. So she appears in the book. She's one of the birds that's in the book, and then one of my peregrines is in the book as well. And that's pretty much where we've got to today. Apart from basically the female goshawk that I'm flying at the moment, a female Harris peregrine, I'm flying at the moment. And that female in itself, I mean, anybody, if you look at my Instagram account, there's a little bit about a female peregrine that's in there, and the female peregrine is called Wonky. And she's called Wonky because she's the first peregrine that we ever bred here at home. And when she came out of the egg, we hatched them in the incubator and we put them back to the parents. And when she came out, she was, we kept looking at this bird and thought there's something wrong with this bird. And we kept looking at it, we couldn't work out what was wrong with it. Anyway, it turned out it's got a twisted beak, so she's a bit like a crossbill, and it's the top mandible that's twisted to one side, so that's why we named her Wonky, because she's got a wonky beak. And this bird is in the aviary with her brother. When we bred her, she had 3 other siblings, and they all turned out to be females, so there was basically 4 females from one clutch. And when she was in there with parents, she's fully parent reared. When we took her out, took them all out, they were all quite large peregrines. There were, out of the ones that were in there were 2 of them that were sort of around about the 2.5 pound mark. Yeah, so quite large. And there was one that was about 2.3 pound. The 2.3 pound one ended up flying at about under 2 pounds. And the other ones all ended up flying at around about the 2.2 pound, 2.3 pound mark. I mean, I've flown Wonky at 2.3 pound and over. But Wonky is the most aggressive peregrine you've ever met in your life. I mean, she's like, my goshawk has better manners than this peregrine. She's nasty, horrible, but she's lovely. She's great to fly. She's got a great character about her. And I suppose the wonky beak makes her even more of a character. But she's the sort of thing, when you go to pick her up, she flares her tail, puts her head down, opens her wings, and she's as if she's going to jump off and basically tear into you. And she'll jump up onto the glove, and then it's as if she's got Velcro on her feet, right, to get her off the glove. And she's not low in weight, she's not high in weight, she does it anyway, she's like that. And she's very aggressive. And the only thing we can think of is in the aviary, this bird, when the food was being put in, because she took a little bit longer to eat because of her beak, her sisters would basically eat their food and then they'd mob her for her food. So she's become very, very possessive of food, and any food. Like if you had a puppy with, you've got lots of puppies and you're feeding them and they all get a little bit sort of like shirty with each other about food. Well, this is the same thing that's happened to her. So I think that's one of the reasons why she flies at such a high weight. Because she is, it doesn't matter what weight you fly her at. I mean, she's just like so aggressive. And when she hits stuff, it's like a baseball bat hitting a ball. It's just incredible how hard she hits things. And also her turn of speed. I mean, she's into her second year. She's flying phenomenally well. But I've flown her up on the drone, and we've had her up to 800-900 foot on the drone. She flies phenomenally, puts some fantastic stoops in. I've had stoops of 135 mile an hour out of her, taking partridges. And I'm not a height chaser, right? Especially here in our countryside. Where you guys are out in America, you're so lucky that you've got such open ground. that height, if you put something up, it's got to fly miles to get to cover. Here, we've got smaller fields. So if you've got loads and loads of height, especially where I am, I mean, even with Simon he's got bigger fields than I am, and his birds are, they fly at phenomenal heights. I mean, he won't flush until they've done 800 foot. But for me, 800 foot, by the time the bird they come down here, it's gone. So I mean, for me, I'm happy with pitches of sort of 400 or 500 foot, more than happy with that, than what I want to do in falconry. And there was a time when I used to do this, and Andrew Ellis, the wildlife artist, right? We've sat here at my house many a time with a bottle of wine, right? And we've talked about this, and both of us don't chase height anymore. We used to, not anymore. And we're happy with what the birds do. And Wonky at the moment is she's going through this period of I've taken her off the drone, the safety blanket that is the drone. To get her to get height when I'm flushing stuff underneath her. Because what I do is I put the drone up, and even if I put the drone up 2 fields away, then she'll gain height, no problem. She won't go to the drone. She just uses it as sort of like a measuring stick. And she'll go up and she'll give me that 500-600 foot, and then I'll flush wild game underneath her, and she'd put a phenomenal stooping. But if the drone don't go up, I'm getting sort of like 150 to 200 foot out of her. And at the moment, we're doing a lot of wide flushing, to basically that she can't catch, to teach her that she needs to go higher, but so that she'll basically hopefully get that in her thick head at the moment. She's not quite got that, but this bird is so powerful that even from 150 foot, she'll come screaming across the sky at 91 miles an hour and knock the hell out of whatever you put up. It doesn't matter how wild it is, doesn't matter where you're putting it up out. She just seems to have this tact to do it. Because she's so aggressive. She's just such an aggressive peregrine. So that's where we are at the moment with those sorts of birds. And like I said, we still have an array of birds here that my wife flies for demo, which I also fly for her. So we've got peregrines and eagles and everything else that we basically fly and keep sort of ticking over. So yeah,
you've got a lot of different wealth of experiences there. That's a lot. I mean, and that sounds like it was within a relatively short amount of time too, like not too far spread out anyway.
Well, I started flying when I started flying the first Goshawk I had. I was probably in my very early 20s, so basically about 19, 20. When that was the first sort of thing.
Okay.
And now I'm 52. So basically, that's so basically in that period of time, we've I've had to calm down my falconry life. Obviously, once you get married and have kids and have responsibilities, you have to calm down your falconry life. But I'm lucky enough that I have a wife that will keep my birds ticking over. She flies the Goshawk during the week. She'll fly it sort of 2 or 3 times during the week, and she'll fly the peregrine. She'll put the peregrine up for me, and take it out, try to get a slip for it. And even if it doesn't get a slip, she'll basically just put it up and then call it into the lure for a stoop, whatever. I'm lucky with that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to fly the birds I'm flying now. And where we live, one of the reasons again I went back to a Goshawk is because where we live, you can't fly a Harris-hawk. It's just too open. Harris-hawk just hasn't got the speed for the birds that live out here. When they get up, they get up like rockets. And there's a thing we call here fen pheasants, and fen pheasants live out on the fens of Cambridgeshire, which is where we live. And fen pheasants tend to be slightly smaller. But what they do is a pheasant in woodland will tend to go vertical, as it's getting out. Whereas fen pheasants here, they don't. They go horizontal as they're coming out. They don't look to lift. They just look to go. And so they're so much faster that with a Harris-hawk, you just can catch them. I'm no way belittling Harris-hawks. I've flown lots of them, love them to bits. And in the right woodland, the right areas, you can get some phenomenal flights out of Harris-hawks, and you'll get a lot more kills than you will with a Goshawk, and without the problems.
Yeah, so it sounds like it was a little bit more spread out then. That's a lot of cool experiences, though. It sounds like you've got to meet some cool people during the time you've done that also. And so real quick, this would probably be a good time to go ahead and end kind of talking some about the chef aspect and what inspired you to do the kind of like what you're talking about earlier with doing making these like recipes and these different things, kind of how it was how these birds were prepared a long time ago and all that kind of. So about how old were you whenever you started pursuing that then? I mean, had you already been a chef for a while, or?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a chef. So basically what I did, I worked at the House of Commons for about 13 years. I became a sous chef at the House of Commons. And then from the House of Commons, I also worked at for any of you guys that know places here in London or England, the Intercontinental Park Lane based in London. I also worked at the Ritz, the Savoy. And I also worked at Mossyman's, which is quite a well-known sort of chef here in London. I worked at his place. And then from there, I went to work at where I work now, which is basically it's the premier catering college in the UK. It's Westminster Kingsway College. I mean, a lot of people out in America, the Culinary Institute of America and all those sorts of places, they know our place. We're sort of like the equivalent of what you have out there, of the great culinary colleges or universities that you have out there. So Westminster it's one of the oldest. It's where I was a student. So I've come full circle from being a student there all the way around now to being a lecturer there. And so I when I started working at the college, game was a fascination because obviously, I was hunting, catching this stuff, and I wanted to cook it. Being Spanish, that's the whole thing of cooking. The bird would have to take its bit, and then I would bring the whole thing home and want to cook it. And so over the years, by accident, I gained a very thorough knowledge of game and its preparation that a lot of chefs didn't have. And a lot of chefs here were basically stuck very traditionally in basically the way that they cook. Now, I've got to say that here in the UK, it's very different to America. So here in the UK, game is sold. You can buy it, and you can go into a restaurant and you can eat wild game. So wild venison, wild rabbits, hares, partridge, pheasant, whatever you like. It's wild. Yeah, it's all wild. It's not farmed at all. It's wild. So that's the difference between us and America. I think in America it's illegal to basically sell game. You can process it for your own consumption, but you can't sell it. I think most of the states are. There's some states that you can. But so this appreciation of it, when I went to the college, I started doing a few training things for the college, the students at the college. We're a college that's very forward thinking. We do a lot of stuff that other people don't do. And we wanted to progress that. And I met a food photographer, a guy called Steve Lee. And his son was going to come to be a chef at our college, and I taught his son. And Steve basically is a very famous food photographer here in the UK, worked with a lot of very famous chefs here in the UK. He was actually the photographer for Alaska Seafoods for many, many years. Yeah, and a lot of you guys, if you've seen any pictures to do with Alaska Seafood out there, a lot of that would have been Steve's work. So Steve saw what I was doing, and he sort of said, have you ever fancied writing a book? And I said, well, I wouldn't know how to do that. I know how to write a book, but I wouldn't know how to put it together. So he said, well, let's work together and do it. And we became very, very firm friends. And so that basically started the first book that we wrote, which was Venison, the Game Larder. And the Venison, the Game Larder is actually available out in America. There's an American version of Venison, the Game Larder. And it's I think it's called Venison. It's published by Sky Horse, I think it is, the publishing, New York. It's very different to the one we have here because the American version has got all of the American species, and the one in the UK has all the European species, if you like. But it's got all the preparation, history, and it's a storybook with recipes. And then we got some very famous chefs to basically come in as well. And that took 8 years to write. 8 years of going out and doing stuff. And then before we finished doing that book, 2 years before we finished it, we started writing the second book, which has got the falconry element in it. And that was Feathers, the Game Larder. And Feathers, the Game Larder, that there is an American version of that. That's basically sort of the British one. You can find it on Amazon. And it's that there is all about game birds in the UK. And we have over 17 different species of birds in the UK that we can basically bring to the table. And so it was an appreciation of basically what game was, each of the individual birds, its background, its uses, beautiful photography because we went out and did all of it ourselves, and then trying to give a bit of a history and background behind it. And one of the first things we talk about is basically, how falconry was used as one of the old ways, and the falconry is sort of one of these things that really unites the whole world because basically there is such a history of falconry in all countries of the world. Everywhere you go, there is something to do with falconry. So there's some sort of falconry being practiced. There's a massive heritage of falconry. So basically it was to talk about that, talk a bit about the heritage and how birds were brought to the table. And my love of that, my love of falconry, obviously being a falconer, mostly I'm a falconer, and to try to introduce that into the book. So then what we did is I said to Steve, right, what we'll do is we'll go out on a field meet, and we called it, that section of the book's called the field meet. And as you look at that section, you open that section into it, there's a picture of me with my goshawk on the floor, and she's sitting on a rabbit. You can't really quite see what she's sitting on, but she's sitting on a rabbit. There's all the leaves of autumn around me. And then as you turn the page, then there's the field meet. And in that page, there's basically some great friend falconers of mine with long wings, with some Harris hawks in there, a bit of everything. It's a field meet, all of us out together flying. There's a phenomenal picture of my female goshawk on a cock pheasant. And it's all about basically that day when we're all out and we're flying and we're catching stuff. And then as you turn over, then there's basically when we've got together basically after the field meet, when we're there eating, sharing food, eating some of the day's catch, if you like. And the peregrines are out, the barbecue's going, the peregrines are on a long, oh God, what do you call them? A screen perch. They're on a long screen perch there with us. The hawks are on the fist while we're eating, all that sort of stuff, all that heritage stuff. And then as you turn over, then you've got about 6 recipes, all using fire, barbecue, flame to cook, that old way of cooking with the old sport of falconry, that's a great part of the book, which is very beautifully, photographed. And there's another bit in the book which is called the shooting party, which does exactly the same thing for the gun. And that explains, in photographs, it explains the stories of basically, again, the beginning of the day, the picking the pegs, the shooting of the birds, people shooting everything. Then you open it up into 2 pages. And in those 2 pages is the gathering, which is after you've been on the shoot, everybody comes together to eat. And then there's a further 2 pages that open out from the middle. And you've got like a 4-page spread of a long table with all the food on the table and all the people in their shooting gear eating. And then as you turn it back over, then there's a picture of basically the sunset and empty plates and people going home. So again, it's a way of telling the story of basically what happens on those days. And falconry is very, very close to my heart. I do a lot more flying of birds and basically out hunting with birds than I do shooting. I do a lot of stalking. I should call it deer hunting for you guys. Stalking means another thing out in America, but yeah, we do deer stalking. You guys do deer hunting, but we do a lot of that. I do a lot of that still, and one of my things here, I've become very well known as a game chef, and my thing is to promote basically wild, sustainable game and the eating of wild, sustainable game. What better than a product that's been produced by basically the countryside that's out around us, and it lived wild. It's one of the most ethical things that we can possibly eat. And with falconry, as I say to people that don't understand, what you are doing is you are a person that is basically allowed to be in a place at the right time to watch something that has happened for thousands of years, but you're just in the right place at the right place in the right time, right place to watch that happen. And you're watching a bird that basically is spending its time with you, that is chasing something. They're very equally balanced, and it could go one way or the other. And you have this being that is absolutely feather perfect. It's the most aerodynamically perfect animal you could ever see in your life. I think an appreciation of that and description of that, when you talk about it, gets really, falconry is one of those things that grabs you by the throat, or basically you sort of, and with most of us are falconers, it does grab us by the throat, and we're in it for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I mean, I think that you kind of, without me having to prompt you at the end there, I think summarized everything pretty well, and I don't think I could end on a better note if I spurred it on myself there. So why don't we go ahead and call it good with that then? And is there any last thing that you, any of your other stuff that you'd like to plug real quick or anything before?
I mean, the books are available on, like I said, there is an American version of like say Venison, Venison, the Game Larder, and the actual original books are available here in the UK. I do dedicated books. I mean, if anybody from America wants, dedicated books, basically signed and stuff, I can send them over. A little bit expensive on the postage, but if anyone wants basically those sorts of things, if not, look them up on Amazon, and they're great books. They're very beautifully put together. The photography is phenomenal. For those guys who basically falconry, there's a big element of falconry in the feathers one, and we're just about to finish the trilogy. We're about to basically start. Well, we've just started the last one, which is called Fur, and that will have a big falconry element as well, because fur for us is wild boar, rabbit, and hare. And there will be a small venison element in there as well. But a lot of the hare and the rabbit that we're going to be doing on there is going to be with falconry. There's going to be eagle falconry in there on hares, and also on rabbit with goshawks and Harris hawks and all that sort of stuff. So we're going to do quite a bit of that. But we've got just over 2 years of basically to do that, for that to finish. So yeah.
Really, that's a lot of work. It's a good deal. I mean, that sounds like some of the more I don't know what the right word would be, engaging, original type of recipe books and things like that you could probably get. I can't think of many that would tell a story along with having cool pictures and everything else.
It really isn't a recipe book. I know it's a book with recipes in it.
Yeah,
but it's a story. You read it as a story.
Yeah.
And there are guys that have bought the book out in America, and they've all loved it. And because they read it, I'll say to people, this is not a recipe book. Do not just put it on the shelf, forget about it, and look at it when you need a recipe. Read it, and it will tell you a story about every animal, and then basically tell you through all the preparation to even right to the summing up at the end, where it explains everything about the loss of habitat if we didn't have these birds. So that's the way to read it.
Awesome. Well, after we get off here, I will get your information as far as like if someone does want one personalized or something, like how they can get a hold of you for that, and I'll put that in the description for the episode and stuff whenever I publish it. So I think we're good though. So I'm going to go ahead and end the recording here in just a second. And like I said, I appreciate your time, and I'll get that from you. Just go ahead and stay on here, and like I said, I appreciate the time, and I mean, it was very cool. I'm glad to have gotten a chance to meet you here, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again, maybe in person sometime, and you can make me just a whole slew of food that I can sit there and gorge myself on in the process as well. And
you're very welcome, John, if ever you come to the UK. And thank you for having me on here. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Thank you again.